Lone widow clings to hope in the desolate Montana plains, until a Crow warrior appears with a plea that could change both their fates forever. Two desperate parents, two starving children, and one impossible choice. What happens next will test the limits of courage and compassion. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. Montana Territory, 1876. The wind swept across the open plains, carrying with it the scent of sage and prairie grass. Sarah Mitchell stood on the porch of her modest cabin, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple. 6 months had passed since her husband Thomas had been killed in a mining accident, leaving her alone with their infant son James and a homestead that demanded more strength than she possessed. The crops were failing, the well was running low, and winter would soon arrive with its merciless cold. Sarah tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear and looked down at James, who slept peacefully in her arms, unaware of the struggles that threatened their survival. "What am I going to do?" she whispered to herself, her voice carried away by the wind. The sound of hoofbeats broke the silence. Sarah tensed, her hand instinctively tightening around her son. Visitors were rare in this remote part of the territory, especially as tensions between settlers and native tribes had been escalating. She retreated into the cabin and reached for the rifle Thomas had taught her to use. 3 riders appeared at the edge of her property, Crow warriors, their faces painted, feathers adorning their long black hair. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she watched them through the window. They dismounted and approached the cabin slowly, hands visible to show they carried no weapons. "What do you want?" Sarah called out, her voice steadier than she felt. The tallest of the 3 stepped forward. "I am Black Wolf," he said in clear English that surprised her. "We mean no harm to you or your child." Sarah hesitated before opening the door, the rifle still in her hands. "State your business and be on your way." Black Wolf's dark eyes assessed her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. He was younger than she had first thought, perhaps no more than 30 summers, with a strong jaw and broad shoulders that spoke of a life of physical prowess. "Your fields are dying," he stated simply. "Your animals are thin. The winter comes soon." Sarah lifted her chin defiantly. "That's none of your concern." A hint of a smile crossed his face. "The Apsaluk, what you call Crow, know this land. We can help you prepare for winter." "Why would you help me?" Sarah asked suspiciously. Black Wolf glanced at the baby in her arms. "Your son cries for strength. My baby cries for milk. My wife died in childbirth 2 moons ago. Our children could help each other survive." Sarah stared at him in shock. "You have a baby? Where is it?" "With the women of my tribe. He grows weaker each day." There was a vulnerability in his voice that caught Sarah off guard. "I offer a trade. Help from my people to prepare your land for winter, and you help feed my son." The proposition was outlandish, impossible to consider. Yet as James stirred in her arms and the wind howled through the cracks in her poorly constructed cabin, Sarah found herself considering it. She had milk enough for 2 babies, and without help, she and James might not survive until spring. "I need to think about this," she said finally. Black Wolf nodded. "We will return tomorrow for your answer." He turned to leave but paused. "The settlers 3 miles east were attacked last night. Not by Crow, by white men who dress as Indians. Be careful, white woman." After they rode away, Sarah sat by the window until darkness fell completely, contemplating the strange encounter. Thomas would have never considered such an arrangement, but Thomas was gone, and she was desperate. That night, as she nursed James by the dying embers of the fire, she made her decision. She would agree to Black Wolf's proposition, but on her terms. She would not leave her home. If he wanted her to feed his child, he would have to bring the baby to her cabin. When Black Wolf returned the next day, she stated her conditions firmly. "I will nurse your son alongside mine, but I won't leave this place. You can help with the crops and repairs, but I want your word that no harm will come to me or my child." Black Wolf studied her face. "You have courage, Sarah Mitchell. I give you my word." He extended his hand in the white man's custom of sealing an agreement. Sarah hesitated before taking it, his calloused palm warm against hers. "How do you know my name?" I know many things about the settlers in these lands. It is how my people have survived. He released her hand. I will bring my son tomorrow at dawn. As Black Wolf mounted his horse, Sarah called out, What is your son's name? Little Bear, he replied. He was born as the first snow fell. Strong spirit, but a body that grows weak without a mother's milk. Sarah watched him ride away, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake or taken the first step toward survival. We'll be all right, James, she whispered to her sleeping son. We must be. The dawn broke with a golden light that streamed through the cabin windows. Sarah had been awake for hours, her mind restless with thoughts of what the day would bring. She had cleaned the cabin thoroughly, prepared extra food, and set up a small cot beside James's cradle. Now she waited, alternating between doubt and determination. The sound of horses announced Black Wolf's arrival. Sarah smoothed her dress and stepped onto the porch. Black Wolf dismounted, followed by 2 women from his tribe. In his arms, wrapped in a beautifully beaded blanket, was a tiny bundle. This is Little Bear, Black Wolf said, approaching Sarah with reverence. The infant was smaller than James, with copper skin and a wisp of black hair. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. And these are my sisters, Red Blossom and Swiftwater. They will help with your home while I tend to your land. Sarah nodded to the women, who regarded her with cautious curiosity. She held out her arms to take Little Bear, and for a moment, Black Wolf seemed reluctant to part with his son. I will care for him as my own, Sarah assured him softly. Black Wolf's eyes met hers, filled with both gratitude and apprehension. His mother's spirit watches us, he said. Sunset Moon would be grateful. Sarah brought Little Bear inside, placing him gently on the cot. James was awake now, gurgling contentedly in his cradle. The 2 women followed her in, immediately assessing the cabin's needs without a word. Red Blossom, the elder of the 2, spoke in broken English. We fix holes in walls. Winter cold not good for babies. Swiftwater, who appeared no older than 16, smiled shyly at Sarah, before beginning to sweep the floor with a handmade broom she had brought. Outside, Sarah could hear Black Wolf working in the fields. Curiosity drew her to the window. He had brought seeds and tools unlike any she had seen before, working the soil with practiced movements. 2 other Crow men had joined him, bringing with them several horses loaded with supplies. When Little Bear began to cry, Sarah sat in the rocking chair Thomas had made for her and nursed both babies together. It felt strange at first, but also oddly natural. Little Bear's hungry desperation gradually eased as he fed, and Sarah felt an unexpected wave of tenderness for this child who was not her own. Red Blossom watched with approval. You have strong milk. Little Bear will grow strong now. Days turned into weeks, and a rhythm developed. Each morning Black Wolf would arrive with his sisters and sometimes other members of his tribe. They worked tirelessly on the homestead while Sarah cared for the babies. Little Bear began to thrive, gaining weight and strength, his dark eyes following Sarah's movements with growing awareness. Sarah learned that Black Wolf's people were camped in a hidden valley 10 miles away, deliberately keeping their distance from the settlers and the military outposts. They had chosen to help her not only because of Little Bear's needs, but because Black Wolf had observed her for months and believed she was different from other settlers. You speak to the land with respect, he told her one evening as they sat on the porch. You do not take more than you need. Sarah was surprised by his words. How would you know that? Black Wolf pointed to the tree line at the edge of her property. I watched you plant the beans in circles around the corn. You learned from observing our ways. Sarah nodded. Thomas and I noticed how the native crops flourished while ours struggled. We decided to try your methods. She paused, remembering her husband's curiosity and openness. Not everyone approved. Your husband was a wise man, Black Wolf said. Yes, he was, Sarah replied softly, unexpected tears forming in her eyes. It had been weeks since she'd allowed herself to cry for Thomas. Black Wolf respectfully looked away, giving her a moment to compose herself. Tomorrow I will repair your roof. The rains come soon. As he turned to leave, Sarah found herself asking, Will you tell me about Sunset Moon? About Little Bear's mother? Black Wolf stilled, his back to her. For a moment she thought he would refuse, but then he sat back down, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Sunset Moon was born to the river band of our people. Her hair was as black as a raven's wing, her laugh like water over stones. His voice grew softer. She could ride faster than any woman or man. She chose me when many warriors sought her hand. Sarah listened, captivated by the love evident in his voice. When the baby came too early, the blood would not stop. Her last words were to name him Little Bear, after my father. Black Wolf's hands tightened on his knees. She made me promise to keep him alive, no matter what I must do. That's why you came to me, Sarah realized. Black Wolf nodded. The white doctor at the fort would not help an Indian woman. Our medicine could not save her. There was a deep bitterness in his words. But I will not lose my son too. Sarah reached out impulsively and touched his arm. You won't. Little Bear grows stronger every day. Black Wolf looked at her hand on his arm, then at her face. Something unspoken passed between them, a moment of connection that startled them both. Sarah withdrew her hand quickly, confused by the sudden quickening of her heart. I should check on the children, she murmured, rising to her feet. As autumn deepened, the homestead transformed. The roof no longer leaked. The walls were reinforced with clay and stone. The root cellar was filled with vegetables grown from crow seeds, and the smokehouse contained enough meat for the winter. Sarah's life, which had seemed so hopeless, now held promise. But not everyone viewed the arrangement favorably. Rumors spread among the scattered homesteads about the widow who had gone native. One afternoon, while Black Wolf was repairing a fence, 3 riders approached. Sarah recognized them as men from the settlement, led by Silas Gardner, a man who had made unwanted advances after Thomas's death. Mrs. Mitchell, Silas called out, his tone falsely pleasant. We've come to check on you and the boy. Folks are concerned about your visitors. Sarah stepped onto the porch, James in her arms. As you can see, we're doing fine. Better than we were, in fact. Silas's eyes narrowed as he spotted Black Wolf, who had straightened and was watching them intently. You're harboring savages, Sarah. That ain't right, and it ain't safe. These people have helped me survive, Sarah replied firmly, which is more than anyone from the settlement offered to do. Now, that ain't fair, Silas protested, dismounting. I offered to marry you, take care of you proper. And I declined, Sarah reminded him. Please leave, Mr. Gardner. You're not welcome here. Silas's face darkened with anger. He took a step toward the porch, but suddenly Black Wolf was there, standing between them. Though he carried no weapon, his presence was intimidating. The woman has asked you to leave, Black Wolf said calmly. Silas spat on the ground. This ain't over, Sarah. The army's coming through these parts next week. They'll be mighty interested to hear about your arrangement with these heathens. After the men rode off, Sarah turned to Black Wolf, fear evident in her eyes. What will happen if the soldiers come? Black Wolf's expression was grim. They will force us away from these lands they will not understand. That night, after the crow had left, Sarah sat by the fire holding both babies, torn between the safety they had built together and the danger their arrangement now posed for Black Wolf's people. The threat of the army's arrival hung over the homestead like a storm cloud in the days that followed. Black Wolf and his people continued their work, but there was a new urgency to their preparations. More supplies were brought, hidden in places Sarah wouldn't have thought to store them. Hunting paths and escape routes were casually mentioned during everyday conversation. You're preparing to leave, Sarah said to Black Wolf one morning as they worked side by side in the vegetable garden. He didn't deny it. My people cannot be found here when the blue coats arrive. Sarah felt a pang of sadness that surprised her with its intensity. And Little Bear, will you take him with you? Black Wolf straightened, wiping soil from his hands. He has grown stronger with your milk, but the journey would be hard on one so young. He hesitated. If you are willing, I would ask that he stay with you until the first snow melts. And where will you be? Sarah asked, trying to keep the concern from her voice. We move to the winter grounds in the high country. The soldiers do not go there. His dark eyes searched her face. When spring comes, I will return for my son. The thought of Black Wolf leaving for months sent an unexpected wave of emptiness through Sarah. She had grown accustomed to his presence, his quiet strength, his rare but warming smile. Little Bear had become as dear to her as her own son. and the idea of eventually parting with him was painful. Yet she understood Black Wolf had no choice. "I'll keep him safe," she promised. "But what about Silas and the others? They know about you, about us. That is why I must speak with you about a difficult matter," Black Wolf said, his expression grave. "My people believe the safest path would be for you to come with us." Sarah stared at him in shock. "Leave the homestead? Go with your tribe?" Black Wolf nodded. "Just until the danger passes. The settlers already whisper that you have chosen the Indian way. The soldiers will question you. They may take the children." The possibility sent a chill through Sarah. She had heard stories of mixed-blood children being taken from their parents, of women who associated with natives being treated as outcasts or worse. "I can't just abandon everything Thomas and I built," she said, though with less conviction than she might have had months ago. "You would not be abandoning it," Black Wolf countered. "You would be protecting it by staying alive. We can help you hide your most valuable possessions. When it is safe, you can return." That evening, as Sarah nursed the babies, she weighed her options. The homestead was finally thriving. But what good was that if she and the children were in danger? And yet, to flee with a Crow tribe, to become what Silas and others already accused her of being, a woman who had gone native, was that truly the answer? As darkness fell, a soft knock came at the door. Sarah opened it to find Swiftwater standing there, her young face etched with worry. "Riders coming," she said urgently. "Many men? Not soldiers. Bad men." Sarah's heart raced. "How far?" "Maybe 1 hour. They stop at other homestead first." Swiftwater pressed something into Sarah's hand, a small knife with a bone handle. "Black Wolf says prepare. He comes soon." Sarah thanked her and quickly began gathering essentials: food, clothes, blankets for the babies. She had just finished when Black Wolf arrived, his face painted for war, riding a horse that was similarly decorated. "Silas Gardner leads them," he said without preamble. 20 men, they carried torches. "A mob," Sarah whispered, horror filling her. She had heard of vigilante groups attacking homesteaders who traded with Indians, burning them out, sometimes worse. "There is no time to reach the high country," Black Wolf said, "but I know a place where we can hide until they pass. You must come now." Sarah didn't hesitate. She bundled the babies while Black Wolf loaded her supplies onto a pack horse. Within minutes they were riding away from the homestead, Sarah clinging to Black Wolf's back with one arm, while holding James securely against her chest. Little Bear was strapped to Black Wolf in a cradle board. They rode hard for nearly an hour, following a creek bed to hide their tracks. Finally, they reached a series of rocky outcroppings. Black Wolf led them through a narrow passage that opened into a hidden canyon. Inside, the rest of his people were already setting up camp. "They found us at our camp yesterday," Black Wolf explained as he helped Sarah dismount. "We were already moving when Swiftwater saw the riders heading toward your homestead." Red Blossom took the babies while others helped Sarah settle into a small hide tent. The canyon was well protected, with high walls and only one narrow entrance that could be easily defended. Water flowed from a spring at the back, and stores of dried meat and wild plants were already laid out. "We will be safe here," Black Wolf assured her, "but we must remain silent. Sound carries in these hills." As night deepened, Sarah sat with the babies in the tent. Outside, she could hear the Crow warriors preparing for a possible confrontation, their voices low and determined. Black Wolf entered the tent, bringing her a cup of hot tea. "They may find your homestead empty and continue searching," he said, sitting across from her. "Or they may wait for your return." "What if they burn it?" Sarah asked, the thought bringing tears to her eyes. Black Wolf's expression softened. "Then we will rebuild it. Together." The word "together" hung in the air between them. Sarah looked up to find Black Wolf watching her intently, a question in his eyes that he didn't voice. "Why have you helped me so much?" Sarah asked. "It was never just about Little Bear, was it?" Black Wolf was silent for a long moment. "When I first saw you working alone in your fields after your husband died, I saw courage. When the other settlers offered help that came with demands, you refused." He smiled slightly. "You reminded me of Sunset Moon. Proud, strong, unwilling to bow." "I'm not strong," Sarah confessed. "I've been terrified every day since Thomas died. Courage is not the absence of fear, Black Wolf said gently. It is acting despite fear. He reached out hesitantly and touched her cheek, wiping away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. You have a warrior's heart, Sarah Mitchell. The touch of his hand sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with fear or gratitude. For months, she had pushed away any feelings beyond appreciation for his help, telling herself it was too soon after Thomas, that their worlds were too different. But in that moment, with danger surrounding them and an uncertain future ahead, the connection between them felt undeniable. Black Wolf must have sensed her thoughts, for he withdrew his hand and stood. I should check the sentries. Try to rest. After he left, Sarah lay down beside the sleeping babies, her mind and heart in turmoil. She had not expected to feel this way again after Thomas, especially not for a man whose world was so different from her own. Yet in the months they had worked side by side, she had come to admire Black Wolf's wisdom, his gentle strength, his devotion to his son and his people. Sleep eluded her, and she was still awake when Black Wolf returned hours later. They found your homestead, he said quietly, crouching at the tent entrance. They did not burn it, but they searched it thoroughly. Now they make camp there, waiting. For how long? Sarah asked. Until they believe you will not return, or until the army arrives. Black Wolf's expression was troubled. The army brings more danger. They force all Crow to reservations now. Sarah sat up, careful not to disturb the babies. What will you do? Some of my people will go north to join our cousins beyond the border. Others will surrender to the reservation. His jaw tightened. I have not decided. And what about me? About James? Sarah asked, voicing the question that had been haunting her. Black Wolf looked at her directly. You could claim that we took you against your will, that you escaped. The settlers would believe this. That would be a lie, Sarah said firmly. A lie that might save your home, Black Wolf countered. At what cost? Betraying those who helped me? Teaching my son that expedience matters more than truth? Sarah shook her head. I won't do it. A rare smile crossed Black Wolf's face. I knew you would say this. Then why suggest it? To be certain of your heart. He moved closer, sitting beside her. Sarah Mitchell, I offer you a different path. Come with us to the northern lands. There are valleys there where both our peoples live in peace, where children like James and Little Bear can grow together. Sarah's breath caught. You're asking me to leave everything behind, my home, my country. I am asking you to consider a new home, a new beginning. Black Wolf took her hand in his. I do not ask lightly, nor do I ask only for Little Bear's sake. The meaning behind his words was clear. This was more than an offer of sanctuary. It was an offer of a shared future. Sarah looked down at their joined hands, one pale, one copper, both calloused from work, both capable of gentleness. I need time to think, she said finally. Black Wolf nodded, understanding in his eyes. Dawn is still hours away. Rest now. The path ahead will be clearer with the morning light. As he moved to leave, Sarah caught his hand. Stay, she whispered. Just sit with me while the children sleep. And so Black Wolf settled beside her in the small tent, their shoulders touching, their voices low as they spoke of their childhoods, their hopes, and the uncertain future that awaited them all with the coming of dawn. Dawn crept into the canyon with tentative fingers of light. Sarah awakened to find Black Wolf gone, the babies still sleeping peacefully side by side. Outside the tent, the camp was stirring quietly, women preparing a simple breakfast, warriors checking weapons, children being hushed when their voices rose too high. Red Blossom brought Sarah a bowl of hot porridge sweetened with dried berries. Black Wolf gone to watch settlers, she explained. He say you stay here today, too dangerous. Sarah nodded her thanks and ate, her mind clearer after a few hours of sleep. The decision before her was monumental. Stay and fight for her homestead, risking not only her safety but that of her son and Little Bear, or leave with Black Wolf's people for an uncertain future in an unknown land. What would Thomas have wanted? The question had guided many of her choices since his death, but now she realized it was the wrong question to ask. Thomas was gone. This decision was hers alone to make, for her future and for James's. Midday came and went with no sign of Black Wolf. Sarah helped the Crow women with their tasks, learning more about their ways in those hours than she had in months of working alongside them at her homestead. They treated her not as an outsider, but as one of their own, teaching her words in their language, showing her how they wove baskets so tightly they could carry water. It was late afternoon when Black Wolf finally returned, his expression grim as he gathered the tribal elders. Sarah watched from a distance as they spoke in hushed tones, the conversation intense. When they finished, Black Wolf came directly to her. "The army has arrived at the fort," he said without preamble. "2 companies. They prepare to search for all Crow in this region." Sarah's heart sank. "And the men at my homestead? They remain, but they argue among themselves. Some wish to return to town. Others want to continue searching." Black Wolf's eyes held hers steadily. "We must leave tonight under cover of darkness. Those who choose to go north must start the journey now. And those who don't? They will surrender to the reservation tomorrow." His voice held no judgment, only a deep sadness. "It is each family's choice." Sarah looked around at the people who had helped her survive, who had welcomed her into their hidden canyon, who had treated her son as one of their own. "What would happen if I went to the reservation with you?" Black Wolf shook his head firmly. "The Indian agent would separate us. They would not allow a white woman to live with the Crow. They might even take James from you, claiming you are unfit." His expression softened. "And I will not go to the reservation, Sarah. I cannot live caged." The weight of the moment pressed down on Sarah. This was not just about where to live, but about who she would become. The woman who had arrived in Montana territory 3 years ago as a hopeful bride was gone, transformed by loss, by struggle, and by the unexpected connections she had formed with Black Wolf and his people. "If I go north with you," she said slowly, "what would that mean? For us?" Black Wolf took her hands in his. "Among my people, when a man and woman choose to walk the same path, they become as one lodge, one fire, one heart." His voice deepened. "I would honor you as my wife if that is your wish. James would be my son, as Little Bear would be yours, not by blood but by choice." The directness of his proposal took her breath away. Yet hadn't they been moving toward this moment for months? Every shared task, every conversation, every look exchanged over the heads of their children had been drawing them closer. "The journey will be dangerous," Black Wolf continued. "The borderlands are not always peaceful. But there are Crow bands there who trade freely with the white settlers, places where both our ways can exist together." Sarah thought of her homestead, the dream she and Thomas had built. It represented safety, familiarity, the life she had always expected to live, but it also represented isolation, struggle, and now danger. "I need to see it one more time," she said finally. "My home. If I'm going to leave it behind, I need to say goodbye." Black Wolf studied her face. "It would be dangerous. I know, but it's important." Sarah held his gaze, unwavering. After a moment, Black Wolf nodded. "We will go together, under cover of night. A small party, just us and 2 warriors. If it is safe, you can enter your home one last time." As night fell, preparations were made. The tribe would split into 3 groups, one heading north immediately, one preparing to surrender at the reservation, and a small party including Black Wolf and Sarah that would circle back to the homestead before making their way north. The babies were secured in cradle boards, supplies distributed, final embraces exchanged between those who might never see each other again. Red Blossom hugged Sarah tightly. "You have strong heart," she said. "Good for my brother. Good for Little Bear." Swiftwater gave her a small beaded pouch. "Medicine for journey," she explained shyly. "Keep babies safe." Under a moonless sky, Sarah rode behind Black Wolf, James secured to her chest, while Little Bear rode with one of the warriors. They traveled in silence, using hidden trails that wound through the hills. After several hours, they reached a ridge overlooking Sarah's homestead. In the valley below, several campfires burned. Men moved around them, their voices occasionally carrying on the night breeze. There were fewer than before. Perhaps 10 men remained, including Silas Gardner. "Too many," Black Wolf whispered. "We cannot approach safely." Sarah stared at the cabin that had been her home, at the fields she and Thomas had planted, at the future she had imagined there. A sense of closure washed over her. That life was already gone, had been since the day Thomas died. What remained was the shell of a dream, not the dream itself. "I've seen enough," she said softly. "Let's go." Black Wolf searched her face in the darkness. "You are certain? Once we cross the northern border, you may never return." Sarah looked at James sleeping against her chest, at Little Bear in the warrior's arms, and then at Black Wolf, the man who had entered her life as a stranger and now held a place in her heart she had thought would remain empty after Thomas's death. "My home isn't a place," she realized aloud. "It's the people I love. It's where my children are safe, where we can build a future together." Black Wolf's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "Then we go north, as one family." They turned their horses away from the homestead and headed into the wilderness. The journey ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but as they rode side by side under the vast Montana sky, Sarah felt a sense of rightness settle in her heart. 3 weeks later, they crossed into Canadian territory, where the Northwest Mounted Police maintained more peaceful relations with the native tribes. They traveled further, joining a band of Crow who had established a permanent camp near a trading post. The community was a blend of native traditions and settler influences, with log cabins built alongside traditional teepees, fields of crops using methods from both cultures. Black Wolf and Sarah were welcomed, their unusual family accepted without question. They built their home on the edge of a clear stream, with views of mountains that reminded Sarah of the ones near her Montana homestead, yet different enough to represent their new beginning. On a warm spring evening, as the babies, now nearly 1 year old, played together on a blanket, Black Wolf took Sarah's hand and led her to the center of the village. There, before the gathered community, they exchanged vows that bridged their different worlds. "Our paths were separate," Black Wolf said, placing a beaded necklace around Sarah's neck. "But now they join as one, 2 rivers becoming one greater river." Sarah, wearing a dress that combined her settler's style with Crow beadwork made by Red Blossom, placed a simple band of silver on Black Wolf's finger, a ring that had once been Thomas's, now a symbol of her new promise. "From different worlds we create our own," she replied, the Crow word she had practiced for weeks flowing naturally now. "One lodge, one fire, one heart." That night, as they sat outside their new home watching stars appear in the darkening sky, James and Little Bear sleeping peacefully inside, Black Wolf spoke of the